Batman, One Bad Day, Mr. Freeze, issue 1, Jerry Duggan writing with Matteo Scalera on the art. So is this our fourth One Bad Day? Or third? Maybe third.
I think of...
No, I think it's fourth, because we've had Penguin, we had Riddler, and we had Two-Face. This is the fourth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so from a creative team perspective, this was probably the one that I was the least excited for so far. But
I like Scalera's art a lot.
Well, I didn't know who he was off the top of my head, so I didn't have any. But the writer, Jerry Duggan's not someone that inspires any kind of feeling from me, good or bad. So, I went in with this, kind of just neutral and was curious. I like Mr. Freeze as a character, so I was curious what they were going to do with it.
Yeah, what their aim is take all that sympathy that you have from the typical Freeze origin and make him less sympathetic.
I actually think it's a bit more complex than that. I think what they were trying to do here is they were trying to split the difference between the traditional Mr. Freeze backstory that most people know and kind of take some of the ideas of what Scott Snyder did in the New 52 and sort of go somewhere in between the two of them so that you have something that's more akin to the classic story but brings in some of that less sympathetic element that was introduced with the Scott. Because if no one remembers this, in the New 52, Scott Snyder redid Mr. Freeze's backstory with a sort of twist, which was that he was never actually married to Nora Freeze. That wasn't really her name. This was a woman he was stalking and obsessed with, and who wanted nothing to do with him. So it kind of turned him into this big creep. So it took all the sympathy was gone, and he was this monster. Which was an interesting issue because it was an annual that told that story. But at the same time,
art, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think most of us really necessarily liked the change.
it was one of those typical. I'm not going to hold Snyder responsible, really, because I think it was one of those New 52 change for the sake of change. Like he probably got told he had to change it to some degree.
Oh yeah, possibly. I think what this is doing is a bit more interesting though, because this is basically saying no, they were married. He does love her. But it's presenting the idea that it wasn't a perfect marriage and that there's, some, the way he's going about this, it's not, because I think his backstory before, one from the animated series and the one that's been traditionally presented in comics is that, he loved his wife got sick, he froze her, and he hopes to cure her one day, all that stuff. It's all fine, right? And, obviously the animated series episodes about it are really good and all that. I think what this does is that it makes it feel more real in a way, because it's saying, no, it's not just this fairy tale thing of this perfect husband who wanted to do this for his wife, but he turned evil because, this accident happened. It's presenting that, no, he had problems and there was, I don't know, I feel like this added more layers to the character to me.
It's because I understand where it's come from and why you like that. I think for me, the idea that he was, again, I think for me as well, this falls more on the idea with One Bad Day, is that he was a quote unquote normal kind of regular upstanding guy beforehand. He did love his wife. It was a if not perfect relationship, but healthy relationship, because this definitely painted as extremely unhealthy. I think I prefer that idea that and then in his trying to find a cure, things go wrong, and it's not just about having an accident, but more the situation makes him more cynical as time goes on, and he becomes worse. I prefer that angle than this, where he's kind of a shitbag already. Like this is definitely presented as, no, he's a very controlling husband. He's not a good person, and I don't really like that angle. And it's not as bad as the New 52 take on it. Don't get me wrong, it's not as far in that direction. But I still don't really like this side of it either. It still takes away what I liked about Mr. Freeze's origin.
It's a believable level of flaw, though. I think what I like about it is that it's not... I don't think it does make him a completely awful person, necessarily. I think it takes him and says, no, he had his faults. Because I think... Because it's not like he goes to this extreme level where they say he's controlling of her by the end, and obviously it's kind of shitty that he doesn't let her friends see her before she's, seemingly going to die. But by and large, it sounds more like a natural kind of relationship where he does just sort of retreat into his work. He doesn't socialize. He's kind of cut off from the world. and that makes her feel alienated. And it feels like, no, they had actual marriage problems that she's kind of been honest about, as she thinks she's dying, and he's not going to be willing to let it go. But it raises this interesting question: is he freezing her and being determined to save her for her sake because she wants to live? I think finding out that she actually was like, no, I'm ready to die. Don't like obsess over me. Like, do something good because you've got a you're intelligent, you've got this brain, you have the capacity for helping people, which of course you get, because I think that's the thing with the ending, is that there is a little bit of that gets through, and he does actually do something good for the world at the end of the issue. But this idea that he's actually doing it out of this selfish thing because he needs her in his life to obsess over, and perhaps maybe even you could argue that some of it might even be guilt over the fact that he didn't give her any attention for a long time up until she got sick and started dying. I'm kind of reading into that a little bit there. It's not necessarily spelled out, but I think I'm not saying I necessarily want this to be the canon origin necessarily going forward, but I think I appreciate that it tried to just make the relationship feel a bit more real, that there was some problems, but it didn't necessarily start off in a problematic place. It wasn't, he was a stalker who was, staring at her and like
I say,
delusional.
It's significantly better than the new 52 version in that respect.
Yeah,
I think for me, like I said, you can have problems, and it doesn't have to be a perfect marriage for me, but I think the fact here where it gets to the point of like, oh, you can't see your friends, and it's where it's raising this question of he's freezing her for his sake, not hers. I think that before freezing her, I think he has to be more sympathetic than that for me.
Why?
Because I think for me that's the tragedy of Freeze, is it's in the failure to save her, the desperation. That's where he kind of loses himself, and without her there to pull him back, that without that kind of relationship, that's where he kind of falls apart and becomes villainous. This here, where he's already it's a very selfish reason that he's doing it to begin with, and where he's starting that journey, for me takes away that that entire journey, because he can't go through that because he's already in a pretty bad place. So for me, that's significantly less interesting.
He's not a supervillain, though. I think there's a big difference between a guy who's slightly controlling, and notably, I think I'd point out here that he's only controlling once she's on her deathbed. Like, he's not saying you can, because I mean it's very clear early on that she goes out with her friends all the time. It's only at the very end that he sort of denies access, and he never tells her that. He lies to her and just says it was some nurses or something like that. Yeah. It's only to the other people he's saying go away. So, and I'm not sticking up for this behavior. I want to make it clear. I'm just saying that this feels more like a flawed human being to me. So it's not as much of a switch being flipped when he has an accident one day when he can't save her, and goes nuts and becomes Mr. Freeze kind of thing. I think this is just trying to make it a bit more, I guess, it's a bit more nuanced and potentially grounded. And maybe you don't necessarily want that or need that, but I thought there was more benefits to this, and it felt more like a natural fit to it than what Snyder did with he was a complete stalker and creep the whole time. And
I mean, like I say, on the scale of things, significantly better than that. Absolutely well known. And I think it's a very well told issue as well. Despite my personal hang-ups, I don't think it's a bad issue.
Yeah, it's kind of the story in present day of Dick Grayson as Robin saying to Batman, you don't believe that any of them can be redeemed, and he's like, well, maybe Mr. Freeze because of what happened to him. And it's kind of the lesson that in some level he was already doing things for the wrong reasons, and when Batman sets him up with the lab and says you can work on this, when Freeze fails just once, he gets mad and like crashes the lab and goes out and on a spree and all that stuff. But along the way, there's just some great scenes where he runs into Mr. Freeze in the tunnel. I think Mr. Freeze's first page when he comes out of the shadows is particularly nice.
Oh, that full page, yeah,
that
is very nice.
It's very good stuff. You get sort of the Mr. Freeze origin stuff playing out. Obviously, it has a lot of blues and a lot of the shadows and the colors. It's really, really nice stuff. There's that full page spread where he's kind of doing the, on his knees, arms up, kind of scream in front of his frozen wife. It's really nice.
It's a very appropriately winter issue.
Oh, yeah. It even ends with some sort of Christmas spirit to just, set in the time frame. And you also have a bit of Matches Malone fun when he's looking for Freeze. And and there's some nice things here. I love Alfred being sassy with the let me just spray you with some of Matches Malone's favorite cologne. I got a chuckle out of those little moments.
Yes.
So they track down Freeze, and he has that glorious entrance, and I think Batman. The art is actually quite good. I wasn't really that familiar off the top of my head with the artist, but the art is quite good, I have to say.
It's one of those artists that I've followed for a long time. Like, to the point, I've tried Rick Remender books just because of his art. I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
but
honestly, the only time I think in the whole issue I felt like I didn't like a panel was where Batman throws the Batarang and he's sort of like bending backwards. His body proportions look really weird to me in that panel. But other than that,
I don't even know where that is off the top of my head.
It's just a couple pages after Freeze enters in the tunnel for the first time.
I'll go have a look. See if I can.
Freeze fires his freeze gun at him, and he fires a Batarang back at him. He's dodging the freeze ray, and he throws a Batarang. But he's I don't know. There's something about the he's got
I see it.
He's got a bit of like a Johnny Bravo body shape going on.
A little bit, yeah, he does.
Yeah. It's not a big deal. It's a minor quibble because the rest of the issue looks fantastic.
The page before that, where you've got just Batman in the entrance.
Yeah. Or even the page after with Freeze holding Batman against the wall. Looks really good. So
yeah, and I don't know who's on colors, but they do a phenomenal job because especially in this back half where Batman's wearing this sun suit to combat the freeze stuff. Like, I don't necessarily like the design of the suit. I think it's a bit bulky and whatever, but I do like the colors. The way it has the that orange to contrast with the blues. Stave Stewart on art, shown.
Yeah. You've got a little segment where Batman and Robin are dressed up as Santa and an elf on a street to catch some motorcycle thieves or whatever it is, and just some shenanigans. There's kind of a fun vibe to some of this issue, despite the fact that it's dealing with this sort of more serious side of Mr. Freeze. But yeah, so yeah, Freeze actually kind of flashbacks to his dying wife and her telling him to move on and not obsess over. And that's because that's who he is, and that's something she realized by the end of her life is that he has this obsessive personality, and maybe the marriage wouldn't have lasted forever anyway because of that. And I think that's maybe why I kind of like it as well, is that's kind of like him remembering this is what makes him start to trash the lab. It's this idea that this is true, and he doesn't want to admit it, is something that really eats at him, and he feels kind of called out by it. So, by the way, great panel of him walking away from the explosion.
Oh yeah, so good.
Yeah, especially with the blue lines in his suit, which is otherwise silhouette, that kind of contrasts with the orange of the explosion. Is really nice. So yeah, so they go after him. Some nice shots. We've got like a snowmobile version of the Batmobile that's got the treads instead of the tires. So there's some nice panels of that along the way. So obviously Robin ends up saving Nora whilst Batman and Freeze are fighting, which Freeze obviously appreciates, and he ends up getting caved in at one point, and he's sort of hunched over as Batman's standing over him. It's a whole big climax. It's all very beautiful and nicely drawn. Something as simple as when all the police cars show up at the end of the scene, all the reds and blues of their lights all kind of pop off the page, which I really like. Yeah, there's also a nice little joke towards the end actually, where Robin says, "So did you rent out a LexCorp laboratory because you knew Mr. Freeze was probably going to trash it?" And Batman's like, "Knew is a strong word," but the implication that he could have used a Wayne building, but he didn't.
Yeah, just in case.
Yeah, I thought I liked that, but. Freeze, because he's thankful to Robin for saving his wife, whispers something to him, and it's actually some cold tech that'll help, as we find out in the last page or two, ship medicines around the world, and it'll help a lot of people get medicine that otherwise had to use really intense freezing technology to make it work. So it's this idea that he does a good deed by the end, and actually did something that his wife would be proud of. So I think it's this idea that he's a flawed person, and ultimately he still kind of did something nice by the end, which I think still keeps some of the sympathy with the character a little bit. Yeah. It's a little bit less two-dimensional.
I do like that ending a lot. I think it's a nice touch to kind of despite like my reservations with the issue, with him kind of being more unsympathetic than usual. I do think it feels like a bit of an olive branch almost to people who feel like me as to no, we're keeping him as one of the more sympathetic Bat-villains still.
I mean, I think it goes along with what you were saying earlier with like her being this tether that keeps him kind of good. This idea that she inspired this good action after her death, and maybe the reason why he was getting worse as she was getting sick is that the idea that she's getting weaker, so her power as being his influence of good it was diminishing as her life was like nearing its end. But yeah, it still kind of fits in with that internal logic, I think. So, no, those are pretty good for being the one that I was not expecting to be anything I was excited about. I ended up coming out of it really enjoying it. I enjoyed it's a slightly different spin on Mr. Freeze as a character. I really liked the art. I thought the Batman, Robin, and Alfred stuff was all pretty charming and funny. Like they were very likable, I think, throughout this issue with a little banter and
definitely. We don't see Duggan writing a lot of DC. I can't think of any really.
Yeah, just something like the running gag where Robin keeps thinking he's going to get to drive the Batmobile, only to find out he's not, and then at the end, Batman's like, "You can drive the Batmobile back," and he's like, "Yes!" You know, it's just a nice little payoff.
No, I think he's got Duggan's got a pretty good handle on them.
Yeah.
No one sounded out of place.
Yeah, so it's good. And it sort of bookends because it starts with a snow angel image, and at the end, Mr. Freeze is in the Arkham courtyard making a snow angel. So yeah, oh, very nice. So I like it quite a bit actually. So I don't think there's been a dud yet out of these.
No, none have been terrible.
Yeah, I think the Riddler one's still my favorite. This could be my second favorite though. Riddler was the Tom King one. That was he's a serial killer.
Yeah.
Yes. I know you didn't like it as much.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything. I genuinely couldn't remember which one that was.
Two-Face was a fun continuation of Mackey's detective continuity, with some big weird Two-Face like swings, but still entertaining for what it was. And then the Penguin one was
okay.
alright.
That was probably my least favorite.
But yeah, Penguin's probably my least favorite too. Yeah,
it wasn't bad, but it was kind of a different take. Right, there's a lot of different takes on Penguin right now.
Honestly, the average like rating for me on this, like even if it tanks after this, like the fact that this has been as good as it's been for 4 issues out of the 8 or whatever many it is actually pretty good. Because it could have really been a case of there's one standout and then the rest are all mediocre to bad. Like that was very much a possibility. So I think we're already like out ahead of feeling like the whole line's been a disappointment. The only issue now could be that they've front loaded it all with all the better ones, but we'll see.
That can't be the case because we've still got the McKelvey one to come.
The only issue now is that they might have front loaded with all the good ones. All right, what are you rating One Bad Day, Mr. Freeze?
I'm going to give it a 7.5. I think objectively it probably is higher than that. But just because of the way the story worked for me, or didn't specifically, it kind of brings it down a little bit. But the actual quality of it is quite high.
I miss Matt. All the cynicism's
I'm sorry this story didn't resonate with me.
Wearing on my soul.
More uplifting.
I thought it was quite light and cheery, to be honest, aside from the Mr. Freeze characterization. I'm going with an 8.5. I really liked this one, and I thought it was a really nice self-contained story that was an interesting take on the character, and it was really quite beautiful at times. Great use of shadows, especially.